Okay,
Okay.
great. I'm going to screen share the agenda. I can find my tab. Okay, so today I'm just going to give a super quick update. Haven't spoken with most of you in the last couple of weeks. And then we're going to go over the materials that were sent out. We're going to talk today is primarily focused on catalysts, though. So that is the big focus today. We have to start shifting, even though we're still in the strategic planning phase. We've got to start moving forward into the next phase. So we're going to talk about draft RFP, project ID process, the workshops coming up, and then yeah, this fall we're going to start looking at implementation. So things are going to start moving very quickly. Just as, oh, John, do you have a question?
Yeah, just real quick. That's a great list of things. Appreciate the transition. Conflict of interest policy. I think we need to, if you could maybe get that on your list somewhere, that's going to be neat.
Yeah, that is a great point, and it has been brought up. I'm going to make a note while we're and Eric, I'm just going to take notes directly in here for ease of everybody seeing and making sure I'm capturing everything.
Okay.
Okay. So, quick update just on the workshops and things that have been happening. We have completed, I think, all of our CBO workshops, except one. There was one that was additionally added. They were all very successful. Thank you, Elaine, being one of our primary partners on the call, for helping execute those on the east side. And Kara, Magnolia, Andrew on the call also. It's been a huge effort for our staff, getting all the feedback on what we originally called the core issues, calling them like foundational elements now. Language is changing. Anyway, we are gearing up for our industry sector workshops. So our ag workshop is this Thursday night. Next week we have recreation and tourism, and then we are currently working on scheduling clean energy, natural working lands, and we've had a little bit of community health conversations. There might be another one, so keep an eye out if anyone's interested in those dates going out. And then our deliverable, our actual strategic plan deliverable, is currently being drafted as we speak, and it is getting ready to be released for public comment. Just as a heads up for everyone on the call, there's going to be a communications that goes out about it, very heavy communications, but the first public comment is going to be a packet, we're going to call it the strategies packet. So it's not going to be the whole deliverable that we're submitting because of the time constraints that we're under and wanting to really focus on getting feedback on those strategies and tactics in the document. So when that gets released, if you're like, wait a minute, where's all the backup data and all the things, that's all, it's still being drafted. We just want to make sure that we're getting this first round of feedback that's really, really critical from the whole collaborative first. But there's going to be a lot of communications that goes out about that. Our team is currently drafting it. And then as an update for Catalyst, we have received our contract. It is executed, and we are in motion. And it is happening fast. We just had our onboarding call of some of the logistics last week, and we were the first ones. So we are the first region to receive an executed contract and have our onboarding call. So there are some things the state has to iron out because we had some very significant questions that they had to take back to their project management team. one of the things that is going to directly affect our RFP and project process moving forward, I've included in the agenda. So we're going to talk about that. But yeah, first, that's the biggest update. Moving into the implementation advocacy letter. So that letter that we sent out is supposed to be coming from our collaborative and SBC, asking the state to consider some questions that we had, some issues that impact our region. We didn't see any comments in the document. Did anyone get a chance to look at that? Any major flags? And just as an FYI, have heard no information on the public review for implementation criteria. So I'm sending this anyway, but if there's anything that was like blaringly missing or tone, if you want to look at it after this meeting and then let me know tonight.
Are you talking about the advocacy letter or the catalyst?
Yes, advocacy letter, specifically for implementation.
Yeah, are you going to be sending that so that it will be relevant to Catalyst as well?
We don't have any say over Catalyst because that's already done. So
that's baked. Okay.
Yeah, right. That's baked. So it's just implementation.
I would think, given how the implementation funds have been cut so far back, I would just offer anecdotally, they're not, $50 million a year for the entire state of California. If I've got that right, that's not perhaps meaningful. Right. So I think the advocacy piece, though, is really important for future efforts and to kind of set the stage for rural communities. So I appreciate what you got in there.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. I am going to circulate it. The idea was I wanted this group to give the thumbs up first, and then we're going to circulate it with the council and our other subcommittees. So if something comes up later, take a look.
Can you clarify the bullet point about the co-applicant? It said make additional points for projects that include a co-applicant. I guess I'm just not understanding the argument that's being made there. Is just that it's difficult for us to have co-applicants in this region. Is that what's coming out of that?
Yeah, one of our collaborative members had flagged that since we have a much smaller population and we have a smaller number of potential co-applicants, that is going to be a barrier for our region moving forward.
Okay. Because it's not a requirement that there's co-applicants, right?
It is a requirement.
Okay, I thought it was like an either or, but okay, that sounds good. And then the seasonal wages that drive the region won't be able to meet the desired standard. I saw the number that they had thrown out there. What was it, like 65,000 a year or something like that? Is like the average?
Correct. It's also the standard also includes safe working conditions, benefits, retirement, like all of these. There's a list of things that they consider high wage.
Regular schedule.
Yeah, regular schedule, and seasonal positions don't meet any of those, especially the seasonal forestry positions. They're not safe.
Yeah. Well, this recreation is totally seasonal too. I mean, and then because of all the visitors coming into our region, like healthcare is seasonal. I mean, restaurants, everything is seasonal because of just the number of people that come through. That's just a reality. And in looking at this letter, I was thinking that it'd be great to somehow capture that, but then again, these letters tend to be too long for me, so I'm not asking you to make it longer, but it would be, I think it's important to have that conversation with the state that, because of the influx of people into our region, especially in the winter and in the summer, it's just everything is seasonal here. I mean, I imagine a health clinic has to bulk up in the summer and in the winter because of all the people that are here. I mean, it just affects everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, my kind of thought on that number that they threw out there, I'm guessing that they use some kind of data stats to determine like what the average high paying job might be in this region. Um, but you know, if their goal is to have actual maybe like say green jobs coming out of this, or jobs that are environmentally sensitive and do kind of those good positive works in the community, a lot of those aren't high paying jobs. It's the exploitative jobs that, you know, extract resources, that extract, you know, and take advantage of other people's, that essentially are the ones that got us into this kind of problem. So it's going to be interesting to see which jobs are both, you know, good for the environment and the community resilience, and also pay that wage. You know, it feels like it's going to be a narrow list.
Yeah, it's a very fine line to walk. Stan, do you feel comfortable adding in, like, if you want to like think about it a little bit more later and add in like a few notes just to, as you said, kind of maybe make like one or two sentences a little bit more impactful?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm not really advocating for changing what you put. I think the fact that you put an example of like forestry positions, and you're able to pull in supporting climate action initiatives and wildfire mitigation. I think it's the strongest example, but I would just advocate for you when you're having conversations with the state, like on a phone call or a Zoom call or something, to just remind them that, you know, this seasonality, that's the strongest example. I think it should be in the meeting or in the letter, but like, you know, recreation would be the next strongest one. And then how it just affects every single person or business in our region, just the influx of people. And those, you know, I think it just, you got to drive home like the rural story to these folks in cities, you know, who are making these decisions. So, that would just be my suggestion, not to add to this letter. I think you have the strongest example. But in the narrative, you know, and speaking with them to include that.
And Erica, I don't know what your time is going to be in this, but I think on the recreation, for the recreation meeting on Monday, I think you guys are we're all working together to get some nice strategies together on the land tenure thing that puts a little meat on that bone. So you might be able to add like a couple words or a quick part of a sentence that adds a little bit to that. That might be helpful as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's another good point. Great. Any other thoughts? Donna, John Hopkins, Kathy Galena?
I think you guys have it pretty well under control. I agree with the narrative adding the seasonality, but I thought the letter actually was well written.
Great. Okay. All right. Moving on. So the draft catalyst RFP, did anyone was there anything blaring that they saw, anything that should be added?
I do. So we kind of talked back at the beginning about, you know, the kind of tiers of priority where something that affected the whole region would be the highest priority. The second tier would be like the whole east side or the whole west side. And then the other categories, which would be, you know, multiple counties, and or, you know, something that maybe is just a site specific thing that that is important but doesn't really affect more than one area. And I see that you have kind of this project impacts, like these bonus points things. And I'm not sure how we could like score those things in this, but I'm kind of hoping this project identification subcommittee would be willing maybe to sort the projects first before we score them, and like, you know, kind of looking at projects that affect the whole region first and scoring those, and then and then going into projects that affect the whole east side or west side, and not just bring them in some other order. I don't know if there's a way that we can still capture that priority level before we start scoring, because I don't see anything in the scoring that kind of reflects those priorities that we talked about a couple meetings ago that seem to have like very quick, support from everyone that, yeah, we should be looking at that.
Yeah, so no, and it's not written explicitly in the RFP. You're right. I think the idea is that through the once we have our strategies, right, our strategies are going to be very fleshed out by July, beginning of August. So that will hopefully play a really key role in those project workshops in terms of like prioritizing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then also there is going to be, once everyone submits the RFPs, this group is going to help sort, just like you're saying. So I think I'm going to make a note of it to make sure that we like articulate that in the process, like very clearly, that we'll be sorting them into, like you said, the entire 7 counties, or maybe east side, west side, or a number of counties. Maybe there'll be, and we can outline that.
Yeah. Okay.
John?
Scheduling question. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking that we're not, nothing, the strategy gets submitted end of August, the RFP goes out the next day, actual projects start coming in at that point. Are we going to anticipate we're going to be doing anything over the summer? Are we going to be doing any of this initial kind of project work? If we are, that's fine. Just let's get a schedule out. Because there's a lot of I got a lot of things I got to be planning around, and they're booking already.
Oh yeah, 100%. And actually, internally, the last 2 days, Kristen and I have been making sure our schedules are clear, and then we'll send the dates out to you guys, because we're going to be calling on certain people, especially MLTPA for the recreation projects, to help, because like I said, we'll talk more about it later, or in a couple minutes, but the idea is that we want these to be very technical assistance focused.
Okay, yeah, let's just start getting the calendars out there and figure out who's going to be needed when.
Yeah, definitely. John Hopkins. John, we can't hear you. You're not muted, but your audio isn't coming through.
Maybe use the chat.
While John's putting his question or comment in the chat, does anyone else have anything major they wanted to flag? Craig and Frank, I know you guys just joined a minute ago. We're talking about the draft Catalyst RFP. Any feedback from this group?
Not from me, not particularly, although I'll go review it again while we're talking.
Okay. Elaine, I know you've been super busy. Have you had a chance to look over?
Yeah, I had it open on my desktop for like 2 weeks. And I looked it over, but most of my comments really related to going back to just being able to place priority on that definition of disinvested, addressing capacity issues. So I think you've captured that in the letter. And I know it's just sort of a reoccurring theme for sort of all the work that we're doing. So ultimately, I didn't end up sending those comments to you, but that was the only thing I'd add. Thanks.
One thing that we do want to talk about today is the budget and the budget narrative. And thinking through, like, is there something that we're like, yes, we have to make sure that this is included in everyone's budget narrative for their application? Because we all kind of generally know what those look like, right? But is there something that we want to add or make sure that's focused? John?
Mr. Hopkins? Oh, me? Okay. So just presented with Southern California Edison grant for $5,000 for wildfire stuff. It's incredibly burdensome. It repels you by what it's asking you to do. So I'm thinking we need to, I mean, get whatever you need from the state to check the boxes, but let's find a way to make this as least repellent as possible. So we can get the money out the door, we get the money doing things, and not people look at the application, freak out and said, I don't want anything to do with this. Just a thought. And this grant, I was meeting with Greg Williams with Connected Communities this morning. They went through the same thing with PG&E, a huge, super arduous grant proposal, $5,000. It's like, why do we even bother wasting our time to do that? So I think we need to think maybe the barrier entry question a little bit.
Okay. John Hopkins, were you able to get your audio or chat?
He dropped it into the chat.
Oh,
For
okay.
roles and responsibilities for the respondent, request the specific person or position that has authority to respond and negotiate on behalf of the firm.
I'm just going to copy and paste that. And so for just one follow-up question on that. So for the respondent, do you mean the applicant, like the lead applicant? Because there will be a co-applicant that has to be from a disinvested community. Okay. Yes. All right. So anything else in the budget? So just on that note, one thing that the state has added to our criteria is this Cal Jobs component, which we don't have a lot of information on right now, but if anyone is familiar, it's a database that someone has to enter from the project. So it has to be budgeted in, and it's going to be a metric that we'll have to track and make sure that that component has been done. But there's a criteria, right, for which jobs go into that database. But the idea is that they're going to have to budget in someone to do that data entry. It's kind of a nitty-gritty thing, but it makes sense as part of it's a metric that the state wants to show how many jobs from this program, etc. I know, Stan, you're shaking your head.
I have experience with Cal Jobs.
It's
I mean,
pain.
Only in dealing with it, not inputting anything. I mean, I can't even imagine how fun that is.
It's a whole person to do it.
Well, that's great. We've added a job right there.
Short-term job. But yeah, we will add this into it's not in the current RFP draft that you all received, but just because we just received that update. But when we get more info from the state, we'll add that in as to what extent does that mean. And then the state is going to provide training. So that is the nice thing, is that there will be, they're going to provide the training opportunity. So if we have 5 projects that impacts, their 5 people, whatever that looks like, will attend the training, and that's how it's going to work. Okay. If there's nothing else on the budget or the budget narrative, if you think of something later, you can always email us. But we want to try and roll this out, at least as a draft, as quickly as possible. So the workshops have something more concrete to work with.
I think I think it might be really helpful if there was like a sample budget, maybe, that would help people get that box checked.
Kathy?
Hey, so I'm looking at the project application process. So this is the draft RFP, correct? That we're discussing?
Yes.
So I'm just looking at the timeline. So we're just beginning this, right? We're not like the timeline, the project timeline is already like, this should be hitting the ground, right? Or no?
Correct. So I saw you joined late. So just a quick update. We received our Catalyst executed Catalyst application.
Right.
So we are starting to phase into
Okay.
yeah. So the idea is
how much was the award?
The full amount.
Which is
14
13 million, 9 million.
14 for the everything, and then but for projects it's going to be 9 million for that.
Okay. Awesome, blossom. Okay. I'm good. I'm sorry. I'm really overwhelmed. I've got a grant due tomorrow. And my head's not in the game for this. So I know Donna's on and hopefully she can articulate. I'm still struggling to get Calaveras County people involved in this whole process. So when do we need comments back on this? I
hear you. No worries. We decided earlier the word for the year is chaos. And
right.
If you could provide feedback as soon as possible, like in the next week, if
Okay.
does that seem doable? Yep. Okay.
That's doable. Thanks.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on RFP budget narrative? Okay. Did anyone have a chance to, so the state, because we requested, our region has been making a lot of requests. They provided a sample scoring rubric that we sent out. It was just an example of how it could look. We don't have to use that. Was there if anyone had a chance to look at it, any initial reactions? Like, yes, let's just adopt this rubric, or we need to make some modifications.
Again, it's just so long.
Can we simplify it?
And I get it. I mean, it's the state, so it's gonna be, but yeah, I would just encourage abbreviating everything as much as possible, pretty much. Just because it just, again, it becomes a barrier for for people wanting to participate, I think.
Definitely. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I get this concern that's being brought up about, some of these things being a little bit overbearing on the application process. I'm wondering if instead of dumbing it down and making it like really simple, if instead we can use some of the Catalyst funds to provide maybe some personnel that assists applicants with ensuring like thoroughness or some of these. I know it's an extra thing, but I mean, there's a lot of money in this pool, and I don't see why we couldn't maybe use some of the Catalyst funds to support the regional groups that are trying to go for this stuff in just a technical way.
That is a great comment, and hold that thought. Kathy?
What about projects that are CEQA ready? So I know we talked about that they could get funding for environmental studies, blah, 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 blah. What is there? I don't see anything in the scoring rubrics where they get points if they're already got their land entitlements and their CEQA done.
So the catalyst is supposed to be pre-development and last mile. So if it's shovel ready, then technically it's implementation. So I guess the question is, if it has its CEQA, does it need any other pre-development like analysis?
Gotcha.
Any other thoughts on the rubric?
So looking through that, it seems like it still allows for a pretty broad diversity of project applications. What is there going to be, are things going to be scored more competitively on, if there's a direct connection to job creation, just knowing that there's opportunities for, pre-development and engineering, planning, things like that, that might not have jobs directly created, but, lay the foundation for job creation in the future.
Yeah, definitely. What else? And like I said, we do want to roll this out, but we do have a teensy bit of time. So if you want to think about it a little bit more, you can always go into the doc and make comments or email us and we'll add them too. But Tim brought up a really great question that is a great segue into our next agenda item. So we've talked about this on a high level of what ideally we would like to see from these project ideation workshops this summer, but we haven't had too much capacity given all the other workshops we've been doing to really dive into this. Now time is of the essence. So these project ideation workshops are meant to be very technical assistance oriented around Catalyst projects. So just as a reminder, we have a lot of information on our website. If we're going to be updating it, keep an eye on it. And if you have feedback on if something is unclear or if we should add things, take out things, let me know. But in terms of these Catalyst project workshops, we're thinking that I'll explain the workshops and then I'm going to work backwards just so you know what we're working towards. So we're thinking one workshop for each industry group. So there's going to be a recreation and tourism project workshop, clean energy workshop, natural working lands workshop, etc. And it'll be maybe 2 or 3 hours ish. We're going to have staff that is there to assist with the RFP, making sure it's within the scope and it meets all the objectives from the state. Questions on budget narrative, what are they missing? Is there something that is totally off base? Making sure they have a co-applicant. Any questions around that? Is there matchmaking that needs to be done? And all of this is going to be in person. So because it's summer, all the passes are open. So in theory, we would host the recreation workshop on the West Slope and have everyone come to an area and we would collaborate on those projects in a single setting. John?
Yeah, I just need to go back to that conflict of interest stuff, because we have so little capacity and so little organizations. We start doing that matchmaking stuff, we have to have a very clear policy of what can work and what's going to be a problem. That's just, I'm just thinking of all the different things we could be doing, and I'm like, oh my God, we're gonna be running into each other all over the place.
definitely.
For that, and yeah, I'm just for the project matchmaking piece you're talking about right now.
Yes, so working backwards now, because that's a really heavy lift for one workshop. There's going to need to be prep work. So we're thinking that the first piece of that the first two pieces are going to be done virtually. So our internal team and partners would essentially do some matchmaking on projects that we see have synergies and potential in aligning funding sources. And we would say, okay, you would send out a communication, something along the lines of, you've been matched. Here's a list of the projects that are very, very similar that could collaborate on a much larger project. Here's the contact information for everyone involved. It's up to you guys to kind of come together and try to make this a little bit more robust. The second piece of that would be providing every group, every project kind of with a packet that would include a example budget, the RFP, and a worksheet to work through to start answering some of these questions in a Google Drive that our staff could kind of help monitor, and we can see where people are getting stuck. So it's like good instant feedback for us. And then we can kind of prep to see what we need in those workshops or what the major needs and barriers are. So then by the time people come to the workshops, there's more so asking like, these are our gaps. Like we've figured out this, we've figured out that, but we're missing this co-applicant piece. How can we figure out who's going to be our co-applicant and what's our metric for impacts on disinvested communities? And then you would sit down essentially with a couple staff members and partners in this program, and we would work through that and try to think through how we can, plug some of those gaps before the application opens. So all of this is going to be done before September 1st. So that way, when September 1st, the RFP opens, people are either going to be ready to go. And if there's like a last minute change, it's going to be open for 2 months. So they can still ask questions, or we can say, oh, wow, this project is really struggling and they need this one thing. And we can work on that before it closes. Does that make sense? Does it feel feasible? Is it too ambitious? And this is just Catalyst projects. So projects that are that qualify for Catalyst funding. Any other, because we've had like hundreds of projects, ideas submitted. The projects that are not Catalyst, that are either implementation or completely not related, it's going to have to be dealt with this fall because that SFP is not coming out till probably September, October. John?
Yeah, again, just expectations for this group. I don't know if I'm speaking on behalf of the group or just my own interests. What kind of time expectations you guys going to have? We're all busy doing all the stuff that we do, and I think we really got to have a really real conversation about all that to figure out what your expectations are for us and what we're going to be able to provide.
So I think the big expectation from this group is the feedback and approval on the documents, like the application process itself. So that way we're all in agreement that this is going to be a straightforward application that's mostly attainable, right? With maybe some technical assistance. And then if, we do have these project ideation workshops, making sure that a couple people from MLTPA can help with the scope and focus and kind of connecting the dots, or, Stan on the West Slope, if there, we have our natural working lands, if you can be there, or if you know someone that could be there to help kind of answer some of those questions, help make these applications like stronger.
Okay, and also what about like at what point, help us understand how this gets handed off to the council. I mean, we make a bunch of recommendations, it goes to the council. Are we done? Are they going to be asking us questions? Are we going to have to be working with them on this stuff? And again, is it just one round? Is it going to be 2 rounds? What if all the catalyst money doesn't get appropriated? You can say, hey, we need you guys again to go through another round. Maybe, Donna, you have to answer that now, but let's start maybe thinking about that realistically, you know?
Yeah, so I think it'll be much more clear when we see how many applications really look successful in the workshops. So we'll have a little bit more feedback in August, knowing what to expect for that RFP process. And then we'll know how many applications are actually submitted. And there might only be 10 applications that come forward that are really ready to go. You know, I think that April workshop was a really great example of most people realized when they looked at the criteria, they were like, oh, wow, this is not ready. It's going to need another year of thinking through. So there could be potentially 2 rounds. Someone had mentioned previously, I can't remember who it was, some sort of when the RFP closes and this group is kind of helping sort, adding some sort of pitch camp kind of idea, not super complicated, but just like getting the council ready so they know what they're voting on. So before the projects are put forward in those buckets, that there's
Zoom meeting working.
There'll be some sort of like pitch from each of the project leads, whoever maybe the PI is, and they'll do like a 10 or 15-minute presentation. So that way there's a little bit more context around the projects before that voting process. So any thoughts on the workshops, process around those workshops, what we're asking of people? So there's going to be homework. People are going to have to prep. They're going to have to take the initiative to coordinate, kind of put together like a draft application, and then they're bringing it to the workshop to ask questions, work on things they're struggling with. And this is all going to be done in advance of the RFP opening.
So what's the approximate time frame for these?
For the workshops?
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe 2 or 3 hours.
No, I mean on the calendar, like what?
Oh, July and August.
Okay, thank you.
It's going to be a quick turnaround. So the idea is we'll do a series on the West Slope, series on the East Slope. People will have to travel. We're finalizing the dates with our staff, and then we'll send it out to this group.
Again, we got to start seeing these dates, because I'm more, for me, we're booking already, so we got a lot of stuff going on. So
yeah, I can tell you right now, I'm pretty sure the East Side is going to be August 12th through the 15th, somewhere in there that week. So if you want to, I'm working on the West Slope.
No, I understand. I got some family things that things are getting booked out. Then we can talk about that offline, but we need to coordinate, collaborate on that, especially for capacity that may be needed. If you need people in places doing things, we're gonna have to really get together on that.
Yep.
So Erica, at these workshops, we're gonna go over a draft project. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes. Yeah. So the idea is that these are going to be a space for project. It could either be like the project lead comes and just is like, I'm putting the application together, and these are our sticking points. Like, we need help with a budget, or we're having a hard time finding a co-applicant, or how do we work on this metric for disinvested communities. And then the idea is that it's a space for our team to work with the project lead or a small group and think through some of those things before the RFP opens. Because we want to make sure
Is it okay for us to talk to potential project, people that would have projects and show them, describe the RFP process and everything and kind of bring them up to speed and get them to the meeting?
Yeah. So just so you know, for like in prep and communications, if someone has not submitted a project idea to our tracker, then we have no idea that the project idea exists. So we're basing our comms on the contact information in that spreadsheet. So there's over like, I don't know how many projects we have now, maybe 150, 160. So we're going to be doing some matchmaking to see.
Another project.
Yeah.
Well, some of the ideas that we've been brainstorming, certainly, there's enough general categories out there already that projects, specific projects would probably fit into a lot of them, I would think.
Yep.
So anyhow,
okay. I also think that, if you're saying there's 150, 160, I think a lot of those are really site specific. Last time I looked at it, like they're not even countywide or east or west side wide or regionally. So I think we're going to be narrowing those down, whittling those down like really quickly. So I just want to mention that because I don't want people to get discouraged. Oh, there's already 150. We don't need to find more. I think we definitely need to find more that are going to, kind of hit our priority, those tier priorities.
100%. Craig, Tim, John Hopkins, do you have any thoughts? Thumbs up.
My mind keeps going back to this requirement for the co-applicant from the disinvested community. This is the first time I've heard about this. Maybe I missed it or glossed it over when it was being spoken about, but this applicant needs to just be a name, or it needs to be a fully invested partner that's going to like fully participate in the project and be like a part of the running it and so forth? Or is it just, we need, approval from disinvested community for our project?
So the only language that we have from the state says that there must be a co-applicant from a disinvested community. That's what the bullet reads. I think it's up to this group to really define what that means. So,
but if I may just say, in Craig's case with CHIPS, like his organization is already representing a disinvested community and hiring a bunch of tribal members, correct, Craig? So you need another co-applicant that, or could he just, get a representative from one of the tribes? Or, I think we have a specific example with CHIPS. I think it'd be good just to discuss some details and with Craig. I'd like to understand that too. I think it'd be a good example.
So I think CHIPS is a good example. So you guys had a partnership originally at one point with ISHWI, Intertribal Council. Is that right?
Well, we're still members.
Yeah. So essentially Intertribal Council would be the co-applicant.
And just so everybody knows, the Intertribal Stewardship Workforce Development.
They changed their name.
Yeah, they're now T-Step, and if you Google up T-Step, you'll find 100 of them. So
yes,
a little harder to find. You got to search by name. But at any rate, a co-applicant would have to be one of our participating tribes, I would expect.
Yep.
And this co-applicant, we have to decide their involvement. Am I trying to get money for CHIPS and for this tribe? Am I trying to get equipment for CHIPS and this tribe? I'm kind of lost on that.
I think you're showing the impact. So the co-applicant has to benefit. So if for example, in that very specific example, if Intertribal Council is a co-applicant and you're showing your metric that you are hiring the T-step, you've hired 100 T-step workers that you're providing, jobs and, XYZ. I think that qualifies. Stan?
So it's almost, you need someone from a disinvested community, as we define it, to endorse it almost. I mean, it's almost like an endorsement. Is that a fair description?
But I think the intention is that we don't want to just benefit the organizations that already have the capacity. We want to also empower the organizations that are trying to build capacity in those communities. So T-Step, for example, just because we're on that topic, Intertribal Council, not entirely sure what's going on. Maybe you have more information, Craig, but they are now not focusing on that program, and that program is kind of in limbo. I don't think it's housed currently under an organization. So if there is another, not like a nonprofit, like a tribe, that could pick that up and we can empower them, then it's more of a we're bringing resources into these communities. Does that make sense?
Jobs qualify as resources?
Yes.
So if I partner up with, say, the Washoe tribe, I've got about 30 employees with Washoe in the LTBMU. If I was to partner up with them and have them be a co-applicant, they would need like half of all of my effort. I worded that wrong. They would, my proposal would need to be half, related to that tribe and half related to our more general work. Because the things that we're going to be looking for, we're going to be using across many tribes and many other beneficiaries. So I can bring in a co-applicant, I can hire a lot of these people, but that would be the sole benefit, would be employment for tribal members.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. I think if the program that you're running is benefiting these tribal partners in any way, and they want to sign on to support your project as a co-applicant, I'm not understanding that like any of the funds need to directly go to the tribe or anything like that, like in that kind of way, if that's what you're meaning.
I guess what role do they play other than the forestry jobs? That's my question. So are they assisting with some sort of, cultural monitoring? Are they assisting with reports? Are they playing a role in terms of like being a grantee, or are they just solely the workforce that's implementing?
We do everything we can to get them to expand their role beyond just working for CHIPS, but I have to say most of the tribes that I speak to, they're not well enough organized, or they need a person that can be hired and trained up on the tribal side to interface with CHIPS, that sort of thing. We've really tried hard to get them to do like a lot of the back office duties that we have to do on their behalf and that sort of thing. And we're always met with kind of a disorganization, or no one's sure who should appoint who, and I just haven't had any success in that particular way. You have to be a very organized tribe with a proper government and so forth that is really effective. The Washoe is a great example. They're a large tribe and they make up a lot of people, but if you look at the properties that they own, they're just little tiny dots scattered here and there. And so finding the central person that could point me at somebody that could actually make decisions to affect all those different communities that make up their whole tribe, no one's ever stepped forward and tried to do anything like that. There's more of a conflict between those communities, or I should say a competition than there is cooperation. At least that's been my experience. I'm sure I'm wrong in some cases. There's many tribes, but that's a great example where it's a large tribe, it's influential, but they live in such disparate locations. They don't have one great big rancheria, with the roundhouse and the whole thing. They've just got tiny little 15, 20 home communities scattered all over the LTBMU and or that region. And Irv Jim, who was their chairman for a long time, was on our board. We had more success talking to Irv, only because he knew everybody, and everybody from all these communities admired him, and he'd been a supervisor, etc. But he's moved on, and now there's a kind of a chaos going on there about who would take his place, or is ISWE the place to look to now for support? It's unorganized, and it's not a matter of going in there and organizing it. That's too tall of an order. And, certainly they're not going to let me do that. So calling them a partner, I'm not sure where I bring it in. I'm anxious to hire more of their people, but does half of my grant need to benefit that partner? Do I need to write 2 budgets, theirs and mine?
No, it's definitely one budget. But let's talk more about that, Craig. Let's maybe follow up offline.
Well, because I think it seems like it's a pretty crux issue too. I mean, John spoke earlier to the capacity constraints and the number of organizations we even have to partner with. And so as I'm thinking, I mean, everything that Craig just said about partnering with the tribes is, largely true for all of our tribal partners on the east side as well. So I think it'd be really, really good to have some clarification on this issue. And I have 2 questions. One, is this a state requirement, or is this SBC's proposed criteria?
This is part of the state criteria that was released.
Okay. And then the second question is, it's a partner within a partner or co-applicant within a disinvested community. And that's includes sort of, I know that I don't know if SBC has published their map of disinvested communities yet, but I do recall that we'd seen a draft at one point, and that does include like a very broad geographic area because there's multiple different criteria that is being used to define that. Is that correct?
Correct. It doesn't have to be just tribes.
If I just to follow up on that thread, Erica, we're going to need technical support from Sierra Business Council, very specifically around disinvested communities. At the April workshops, I cornered Jesus. I said, Jesus, what is a disinvested community? Is it the state definition? We've been led to believe that that's something in some of the first meetings we had, that we as a region could kind of make that up. But that sounds like that's not going to be optional. And we don't have any disinvested communities over here. We don't fit any of that criteria. There's one little piece of a census block in Mammoth Lakes that is considered disinvested. So that kind of technical information is going to be critical for this committee to be able to do any of this work. And Craig, thank you very much for your insights. I think we're all looking at those types of challenges throughout all 7 counties. And we're going to need technical support from SBC for this stuff. This is not stuff we're going to be able to figure out on our own.
Yep. And so I'm going to share here. I'm just pulling it up right now. It was on our website, and we needed our GIS tech to modify a few things. So it's not currently published, but I can show you a draft of our disinvested communities map, and it includes much more than you think it does. And we only have the state's definition to go off of, which is frustrating. But actually, maybe it is on our website. Maybe you'll update. Okay, let me switch tabs.
I'd like to say that we use the definition of 200% of the poverty level.
So we have very strict criteria from the state. Where did it go?
I cannot currently find it on our website, Erica. So I think it is.
Maybe it's hidden, but just for everyone, I'm just gonna show you. So this is what we are currently looking at. Oop, too far. So everything that is shaded, ignore the color. Anything that is shaded is disinvested by the definition of the state. So here I'll zoom in so you can see a little bit better, and then I'll scroll down and just stop me if you want to see more. So all of Alpine County is disinvested. Half of Mono County.
What do you mean by shaded as opposed to color? I don't understand what we're looking at here.
So our GIS tech, there's 4 or 5 criteria that define disinvested communities. He broke each one out. So I told him to go back, and so people don't get confused, because it doesn't matter what criteria they meet. The only thing that matters is that it's disinvested or not disinvested, right? So they're broken out into, like, for example, this criteria is the section, the low income communities, that's in blue. The IRS zone, that's in the dark shade. The climate justice tool is the pink. So, but that doesn't matter. Like, which criteria isn't what's important. It's that it's shaded. So anything that's the base map, which is that light color, is not considered disinvested, but that doesn't mean that the project can't take place there. It just, we have to have a metric that shows that it impacts the communities that are shaded.
But are there not disinvested communities like within that huge white area of Calaveras and Tuolumne? There are
not by the state's definition.
Okay.
So these, but that doesn't mean that a project can't take place there.
That's where the co-applicant comes in.
That's where the co-applicant comes in. The co-applicant has to fall within the shaded area, or at least work very, very heavily, I would assume, in those areas. And then the project itself, like if it falls in this white area of Calaveras, it has to, so if there's some sort of forestry work, right, then we can easily show that forest thinning and mitigation would, I'm sure we could find a metric that can quantify the impact, that we're mitigating the impact of fire on those disinvested communities, right? So I think we're overthinking it just a teensy bit, but all great questions.
Yeah, we're gonna need some help on this. If we're gonna have to be able to articulate this in the elevator quickly. So if we have to invest some time to get it figured out, we're gonna have to do that, because we've struggled with this. We struggle with this all the time with the state.
Yeah.
And Erica, there's another element that we will struggle with, CHIPS Forestry, in that our plans call for training and forming up new crews. And when these people apply to the Greater Sierra Forestry Corps, we income qualify them. And we decide that they are disinvested, if you will, just by the amount of money that they make. And they fill out a form, they self-qualify, we believe it, and we enroll them. So if they came from one of these regions, unless I had this map in my lap, as I was interviewing them, I wouldn't know. They might come from that white region right there, but their family is, 3 or 4 or 500% poverty level. So instantly qualified, but maybe not.
I think these are all great questions. That question in particular, we've included in the advocacy letter for implementation. So that is definitely something that we're asking for more clarity on moving forward.
Yeah, and if based on this conversation, Erica, if you get a couple nuggets out of this to put in there, again, we're all dealing, say, with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, current budget problems, awarded grants. All of a sudden, the state is going there and clawing money back and taking money back. I could see that this definition thing, this has got to be legally binding. I mean, you've got to get something from the state that authorize you guys when you're awarding projects to say, this is a definition, it's in the contract and it's binding, so that we all don't start heading off down these things and all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, it's not, it's this. And we're out of pocket and we can't recoup. It's going to be important.
Yeah. I think in terms of the workers, though, just because we're on that subject of CHIPS hiring workers from all over, they don't have to necessarily live in disinvested communities, but if the forestry project is in a disinvested community, or if it impacts a disinvested community, then that also qualifies.
Okay, that's still kind of tough. We work throughout this whole region. Well,
Greg, one other little thought also, Erica, federal public lands. This is something with the big bond like Prop 68. There's language in there that said you could do projects on federal public land. That SNC was able to implement that. I think there needs to be a clarifying language from this. If we get these partnerships together with federal land agencies and we're unlocking and enhancing our recreation and tourism economies, a lot of these projects will be taking place on federal public land. We need to make absolutely sure that that's like consistent with Prop 68. Whatever they use for Prop 68, they use that same language, that would cover it. But we don't want to get bit by that.
Okay, I'm going to make a note of that in our.
And you can reach out to some of your friends up at the SNC. They might be able to help you with that.
Great. What else?
Lunch. Just kidding.
just think that I'm going to get a project solicitation from somebody, and I'm going to take a look at that map, and it's going to overlap disinvested communities and affluent communities. And some of those communities are severely well invested. But you know, the forestry project that they'll put our company on, it won't take that into account. It'll take into account the condition of the forest in that area and how close it is to the urban wildfire interface or urban interface. So it's going to be kind of tough having this sorted out and properly financed. I hope I'm not going to get. I heard the word clawback, and that scared me to death just a minute ago. That's if I got off onto a project and it was discovered that some of my workers were not disinvested or that we had overlapped an affluent area, would I get money clawed back? Because that would be a disaster.
No, because the vetting process is going to be very thorough, so that's not going to happen. But like I said, it's okay. It's going to be inevitable to have that overlap, Craig. I think as long as we're showing that there is some sort of positive impact to these communities, it's not that you can't have a project that takes place in an affluent community. It's just there has to be, because if they butt up to each other and one directly impacts the other, then now you have a codependent relationship, right? So I think that the workshops will be a really good place to have those discussions. So if you bring a project forward and there is a lack of clarity on how that disinvested community criteria is going to impact the application, that's going to be a really good place to have those discussions.
Okay.
Tim?
Yeah, just on that note, I mean, I just wanted to like just direct Craig, I mean, to the line on the draft RFP under equity for required criteria. I mean, at least 40% of funds provide direct, meaningful, and assured benefits to disinvested communities. So that's the definition that you have to tackle, is that 40% of the funds need to be direct, meaningful, and assured to anybody in those boxes.
Well, that's actually a big load off. I can easily work with that.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, a lot of people that are doing, positive community-led work in our region are tackling that, no problem. Because if you notice on that map of where all those disinvested communities are, they're where all the people live. The places that aren't disinvested are like the federal lands. So for the most part, everybody's going to be hitting this target pretty easily. So long as their project's genuinely working towards helping, people in the community here locally.
That's cool. I can work with that. I can make that happen.
How do you guys define the 40% or that percentage? Just out of curiosity, because that's something that I pushed back on the state, and they were like, "Oh, it's kind of up to your collaborative to decide that." I'm just curious how other organizations have worked with those metrics.
One of the big things, payroll is like a huge portion of, the cost for these projects a lot of times. And so like who the money is paying will identify that, or where the project takes place. So if it has a physical address that the work is being done on, as long as that address lays in there, any investments into the site or infrastructure or tools that stay there with that community group that's located in there. And then any of the personnel that are working at that location. So the people themselves that are carrying the jobs, if they live in an affluent community that doesn't lay on that map, that doesn't matter. But if their workplace is the job site that is within the boundaries of that map, then that counts as all those funds that they're getting paid go towards that 40%.
And Tim, that's really helpful. Erica, back to that federal lands thing, right? I mean, it's like everything you've got on that map has got to have a shade on it. You know what I mean? Like nothing is agnostic, because we're going to have to use those landscapes. As Tim is saying, if they're working on these areas, that's got to count. Tim, is what I'm hearing is it doesn't matter where they live. It's kind of where the fact of who's getting the money and where the project work is taking place. So that's going to have to be, that could be very easy kind of a metric that we can say, okay. And that was a nice description, Tim, thanks. But that's the kind of if this, then that, if this, then that. We got to be able to get into that kind of, that kind of talking points with folks. So it could be that simple. And if you have a map that says, if you live here and you work here, that's going to work. If you live here and you work over there, that's not going to work. It's got to be super simple.
Yeah, I mean, we just look at it as project sites for our group. So it's like, it's all for like, I work with administering a CalRecycle grant, and essentially all CalRecycle cares about is if the site address for the work is within that boundary, then it's clear. And then all the investment gets counted. So.
Yeah, that's great. Just want to flag, we've got about 10 minutes left. Any questions, concerns, things you would like to be flagged on any of these documents or issues that we've talked about? John Hopkins, I thought I saw your hand up at one point. Did you?
He asked in the chat if we could send the map.
Oh,
out.
Yes. As soon our comms team is currently working on some things this week, but hopefully early next week we can clean up some of the language and shading issues with our GIS tech and send that out to everyone.
So I just want to highlight, John's brought up this conflict of interest thing a couple times that it hasn't been addressed. I personally don't envision I'm going to have any conflicts of interest because I work for an organization that just defends nature. We're not doing work. We're just member and grant funded, and we're just out there doing watchdog monitoring and so forth. But and from my exposure to the folks on this committee, like I'm trusting that folks aren't going to be lining their pockets with some of this grant funds. And so that's where I stand. I'm bringing this up as someone who trusts the folks on this committee, not someone who doesn't. But I think it's really important we do address that, and I don't think it needs to be. I mean, I think I personally just think there just needs to be disclosure. If there's a project that you have a connection with, I think that just needs to be brought up. At the very most, I think someone may have to just abstain from a vote. But that's personally as far as I see this needs to go. Full disclosure and perhaps an abstention. But yeah, I mean, I know that there's folks in this committee that are going to have some strong ties to folks who might be getting this money. And so that's where I stand on that. And so I just want to put that out there and hope that we get this conversation really figured out, because it's been brought up at a couple meetings now and we haven't really discussed it.
And I would suggest for guidance using Stan, as you know, I'm an elected official, and the laws in the state are personal financial benefit. So if we, like I serve I'm a non-compensated member of a nonprofit foundation. I receive no compensation. If that would be adequate, if that all of us could say, if, again, we'll have to figure this out, no personal compensation. You may be on a board or working with or volunteering with an organization that might get a project. Yeah. I don't know if that's how we want to do it, but the state for electeds, it's about personal financial conflicts of interest. And that might be a place to start. But also, I think Erica, I would check with Steve, because I also serve on this technical advisory committee on the climate change thing with OPR, and Stan, the same conflict of interest issue started to come up with state grants, and OPR they hadn't thought about that. There's a guy named Jonathan Parfrey who's part of that, and he said that, Erica, this gets into the weeds, but CARB had a similar kind of a thing where they had an advisory board and there were grant guidelines or things like that going through them. So Steve or someone like that, if we need to go further, there's stuff out there that can help us. But personal financial interest, that might be a good place to start. Right? I appreciate you underlining that, Stan. Thank you.
And John, I see your comment. That would be great if you could send any documentation that you're familiar with or have used.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And if you want me to send over that state stuff, I can do that. But
yeah, please do. Yeah, we can start putting together a folder and kind of looking at yeah,
because it's gonna, if the value of this is going to be, it's going to have to be publicly disclosed. So when this committee makes recommendations to the advisory council and someone says, hey, wait a minute, there's someone on this committee that's associated, and then Stan, we can say, well, that person abstained from the vote, that person has no personal financial interest. I mean, things like that. So we don't get all, that doesn't get all, because that's where it gets messy. Because it gets, when the money's actually being allocated and recommended by the council, that's where it's going to get tricky. So you need to make sure we can go into that fully. We're good. And Erica, the council should be, last time I heard about the conflict of interest thing was at the April meeting and the council was bringing it up. It's something that they should probably adopt. And we can make recommendations to them, but they should adopt it so that we're abiding by a policy, that we're not creating a policy for ourselves. We're making a recommendation. They can do with it what they want, but that council should be approving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, is that is the conflict of interest stuff, is that exclusive to our committee here, or do other committees, are they going to run into a similar issue with advocating during, their work?
Everyone, I think everyone, and it's, I mean, I don't want to throw people under the bus, but it came up in the very early on from our chair, Barbara Hayes from RCRC.
Yeah, way back.
She asked it right off the bat. She's like, well, can RCRC put forward a project? And there's nothing in the state guidelines that says that collaborative members can't, but I do think it would behoove us to put together some sort of language to like articulate what that looks like. And maybe it means abstaining from a vote.
Because the state has not been good on this. State agencies have not been paying attention, and they've been getting into trouble on this. So
I asked that question just because to try to determine whose responsibility is to come up with all these rules of engagement. If it's just us, or if we need to have a wider group discussion on what these rules look like that are outside of this subcommittee here. Because, I have some suggestions to put forward for some of those rules of engagement, but, maybe this isn't the small group that we need to be, batting these ideas around with. Maybe we need a bigger group to be doing this with.
Yeah, I think that the council needs to make this a priority and get this set in stone and approved. I mean, I think that might be one of the first things that they need to approve.
Yeah, agreed.
Like with a formal vote.
Absolutely. Publicly done, up with some kind of minutes or something. Absolutely.
We could put that together for the June. If Tim and John, if the three of you could send me the language that you would like to see or that you're familiar with as a starting point, we can bring a draft to the council on June 28th. And that could be, maybe I can send it out ahead of time and see if there's any major red flags, and then we can vote on it and just get it out of the way. So that way everyone's in agreement that this is what we're going to use moving forward.
And someone's got lawyers somewhere, right?
Somewhere.
I mean, SBC, well, you guys have got lawyers. I mean,
we could use our counsel if people are more comfortable with, if someone else.
Well, just to take for you guys to take whatever the council comes up with to say, okay, the council's come up with this, and go to the state and have their lawyers look at it and say, you guys good with this? Everybody's okay? Good.
Yeah.
Because again, the state, we've dealt with this climate change stuff, all kinds of different things. And it gets incredibly bureaucratic, and it just gums up everything.
Yep. Okay. Then this will be a priority item for me in the next 2 weeks. Really, it's a week. Okay. It is 1:28. Just a few closing things. So we have our next HRTC council meeting on June 28th. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. Friday. It is in person in Mammoth. All the passes are open. If you can make it, please come in person. It's going to be beautiful. John said it's 72.
Yeah, a light breeze. Light breeze.
Light breeze. There will be a virtual option, but considering it's summer and we live in such a beautiful region, it's a great opportunity for people to get out and come to Mammoth. There's always participant compensation and reimbursements. So you have that at your, you can leverage that. Let me know if you have any questions. Oh, thanks, John. I see your message in the chat. Any final questions before we close?
Great to see you all.
Great to see you all. And keep an eye out. We will be releasing the draft strategies packet on the 21st. For public.
Okay, and one last thing. I put something in the chat. If any of y'all want to come to the Recreation Tourism Workshop on Monday afternoon, there's an Eventbrite thing in there. Just sign up. It's all virtual. You're all welcome. It might probably interesting. We'll see.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. A lot of great
Bye.
content today.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Erica.
Thank you.
Bye.